I would like to wish everyone Eid Mubarak. 30 years ago, the people of communist-controlled China occupied East Turkestan, occupied Tibet, occupied South Mongolia, occupied Manchuria, and others suffering under Chinese communist rule joined together to launch a peaceful movement to demand democracy and freedom. Today marks the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen massacre, in which thousands of innocent people, including Chinese, Uyghurs, Mongols, Manchus, and others were brutally massacred by the Chinese Communist state in order to crush their desire for democracy, freedom, and independence. And since then, the Chinese Communist Party and its occupation forces have been brutally censoring the desire for democracy, freedom, and independence held by the people of China and various nations living in captivity under Chinese occupation. Unfortunately, we regret to inform you that the censorship of true freedom, democracy, and independence has went beyond the territories within the Chinese Communist Party and its occupation forces' control. It is here, even in the West, even in the most democratic, free, and independent nation of the United States of America. But that censorship does not come from Americans who value freedom, free speech, and independence, but those who use the shroud of democracy and human rights to silence the voices that disagree with them. More specifically, the voices of true democracy and independence. As you may have all heard, 3 interlocking Uyghur organizations, the World Uyghur Congress, the Uyghur Human Rights Project, and the Uyghur American Association, has been actively pressuring the good people of the free world to censor not just me, but the entire East Turkestan National Awakening movement, and our thousands of which represents the people of East Turkestan's desire for independence. The desire for independence that is held by the overwhelming majority, which was agreed upon numerous times throughout East Turkestan movement's history. These 3 groups have led our people towards the path of appeasement, down the path of surrendering, referring to our people as ethnic minorities within China, or shamelessly even referring to our country by the Chinese term Xinjiang, meaning new territory. They deceived our people by arguing that independence is unrealistic, unachievable, or that we cannot even govern ourselves. For those who might have forgotten history or have not yet heard of our history, let me remind you that throughout East Turkestan's history of over 6,000 years, our great ancestors established numerous empires and states. It was through the appeasement of self-proclaimed leaders who sold out our nation's future for their personal gains that we lost our independence. First in 1705 with the fall of the Yarkand Khanate, but again, as always, the people of East Turkestan continued to struggle for independence and regained it in 1863. But after the Qing invasion in 1877, the weak leaders that were left to guide our nation guided us towards the path of submission. However, again, we continue to struggle for our independence. And let's not forget that within the past century alone, the people of East Turkestan declared independence and twice established modern independent East Turkestan republics. The first from November 12, 1933 till April 16, 1934. And the second in November 12, 1944 till December 22, 1949. Even after the current Chinese regime invaded and occupied our homeland, the people of East Turkestan have never given up their struggle to end Chinese occupation and restore our independent East Turkestan Republic. Have you forgot our brave leaders like Osman Batur and Zaydin Yusuf, who continued to struggle for our nation's independence? Even at the General Assembly held by the World Uyghur Congress in Washington, D.C. in 2011, the overwhelming majority of East Turkestanis had rejected the path of appeasement, the path of autonomy, or the weak and vague path of self-determination in favor of restoring East Turkestan's independence. Yet these groups rejected the people of East Turkestan's will and continued to lead us down the path of appeasement. These groups claim to be promoting democracy and human rights, but wish to censor the desire to restore independence held by our nation, which has been passed down from generation to generation. Freedom of expression is a form of human rights, but for years these groups have sought to censor the true expressions of our nation, the expressions of independence. Do you all forget why the East Turkistan National Awakening Movement came out as an organization in the first place? Let me remind you, it all started because they tried to censor us from even saying a simple chant, independence for East Turkistan. For nearly 2 decades, these groups have guided our people away from the path of independence and have led us down the path of appeasement. My dear East Turkistanis and our dear friends in the free world, we cannot truly have human rights if we do not have the political rights. In other words, independence, which can truly guarantee and safeguard such rights. Other than misinforming the global community into thinking we are ethnic minorities, Muslims in China, or a part of China as a so-called autonomous region, what have they achieved? It is not because we are Muslims or that we aren't communists that the Chinese occupation forces seek to eradicate us. The reason why over 3 million of our brothers and sisters are in the camps is because of only one reason, and that is because East Turkestan is our land and has been so for thousands of years, long before Chinese civilization even existed. It is because our people desire to restore their independence, and that China's greatest fear, as it had been under the Manchu Qing dynasty during the reign of Chinese warlord Qing Shi and the brief periods of Chinese occupation under the Chinese nationalists. And it is the same fear that the Chinese Communist Party inherited. The only solution to the 100 years of continued persecution we have been facing every time we lost our independence is to restore our independence. Exactly 30 years ago on this day, June 4th, 1989, the Chinese Communist Party sent tanks to crush the peaceful demonstrators in Tiananmen Square. Exactly 19 years ago on this day, June 4th, 2000, I arrived to the United States as a political refugee with the goal and hope that one day, with the help of the free world led by this great nation which I live in, the United States of America, we'd be able to restore our independence and end this continuous cycle of colonization, oppression, and genocide. Exactly 1 year ago, on June 4, 2000, in front of the U.S. Capitol, I launched the East Turkistan National Awakening Movement with the support of friends, family near me, and most importantly, the people of East Turkestan. We laid a clear vision and goals and methods on how to achieve them. I promised you that we would continue our peaceful demonstrations, calling on the U.S. government and the free world to pass legislation to protect the people of East Turkestan, to urge governments to sanction the Chinese government for their crimes against humanity, to urge governments of the free world, most importantly the United States, to recognize the genocide and to recognize East Turkestan as an occupied territory. I promised we would convince people in the West to support our nation's aspirations to restore East Turkestan's independence. I promised that we would explain to the media, governments, and organizations the history of the conflict and the fact that East Turkestan is an occupied territory. I made it quite clear that our only enemy was the Chinese Communist Party and its occupation forces, and that we were willing to cooperate with any nation, any organization, any individual willing to support us in our peaceful struggle to restore East Turkestan's independence. We encourage all organizations to cooperate with us, but these three organizations have constantly undermined our efforts, constantly seeking to censor our people's desire for independence. They claim that the East Turkestan National Awakening Movement is a group of troublemakers, separatists, and extremists that make up a small fraction of the people of East Turkestan. They are echoing the exact same lines that the Chinese Communist Party uses to attack the whole of our people, to attack the East Turkestan National Awakening Movement. It wasn't until recently when our diaspora began to read the articles by Dr. Anders Kaur, that people began to recognize that there are people across the free world who will support our aspirations to restore our independence. However,